My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 38 years old, I never imagined my 14-year-old son would become my protector against my own family. That crisp October evening at my parents' 35th anniversary celebration should have been a joyous milestone. The elegant dining room of Rosewood Manor sparkled with candlelight, expensive wine flowed freely, and everyone wore their brightest smiles. But throughout the evening, I noticed my son Alex growing increasingly agitated, his eyes darting nervously between his grandparents and my ex-husband Marcus. When the anniversary toast began, Alex suddenly grabbed my wrist with surprising urgency. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling, "we have to leave. Right now." I stared at him in confusion.
Why?
"What's wrong?" His young face hardened with a maturity that shouldn't have existed at 14. "I'll explain everything in the car. Please just trust me." If you're watching this video right now, please hit the like button and subscribe to support my channel. I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop your location in the comments below as I share how my son's protective instincts revealed a betrayal that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. My relationship with my parents, Robert and Catherine Hayes, had always been a delicate dance of expectations and disappointments. Growing up in their prestigious Charleston mansion meant living under constant scrutiny. My father had built Hayes Industries from a small construction company into a multi-million-dollar real estate empire, while my mother orchestrated our family's social standing with the precision of a military general. Love in the Hayes household came with conditions, and failures were cataloged and referenced for years. I thought I had finally earned their approval when I married Marcus Thornton, the ambitious son of one of my father's business partners. My parents adored Marcus from our first introduction, his MBA from Wharton, his natural charm at cocktail parties, his understanding of family legacy. For 12 years, I believed we had built something meaningful together, even as Marcus became increasingly controlling and emotionally distant. When I discovered Marcus's affair with his business partner Jennifer 18 months ago, my carefully constructed world crumbled. The divorce proceedings were brutal, leaving me financially strained with 2 children, Alex, my perceptive and protective 14-year-old, and Emma, my spirited 10-year-old daughter. I had to sell our 5-bedroom colonial home and move into a modest townhouse, supplement my part-time museum job with freelance marketing work, and navigate the complexities of shared custody. To my surprise, my parents initially seemed supportive during the divorce. They called more frequently, sent thoughtful gifts to the children, and invited us for regular family dinners. I felt grateful, believing they had finally chosen their daughter over social appearances. Only Alex remained skeptical. "They look at you differently now, Mom," he told me one evening while we organized our new, smaller kitchen. "Like you're some problem they need to solve." I dismissed his concerns as adolescent oversensitivity. "They're trying to help, sweetheart. It's their way of showing support." Alex just frowned, but the tension between him and his grandparents continued to grow over the following months. He would find excuses to avoid their dinner invitations, claiming homework or soccer practice. When forced to attend, he was polite but watchful, observing conversations with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Emma, however, thrived under her grandparents' attention. They took her shopping, enrolled her in expensive dance classes I couldn't afford, and spoke constantly about her bright future in ways they never had with Alex. My father began making pointed comments about Emma's potential, how she had Hayes' determination and could carry on family traditions. Meanwhile, Alex was increasingly treated as an afterthought, his achievements dismissed and his opinions ignored. When my parents announced their 35th anniversary celebration, I saw it as an opportunity for family healing. The intimate dinner for 40 guests at Rosewood Manor, Charleston's most exclusive venue, would celebrate their enduring marriage while bringing our family together during a difficult time. I spent weeks preparing, unable to afford a new dress, but carefully altering one from my married days. I helped my mother coordinate the guest list and menu selections, even designing custom invitations that showcased their love story. Alex watched my efforts with growing concern. "Why are you working so hard for this?" he asked one afternoon, finding me hunched over my laptop designing a commemorative photo slideshow. "They never put this much effort into anything for you." Because that's what family does, I replied, believing my own words despite the doubt creeping into my voice. We show up for each other. The night of the celebration arrived with perfect fall weather. I spent hours helping Emma get ready, convincing her to wear the navy blue dress my mother had specially selected. Just for a few hours, I promised when she complained about the formal attire. It will make Grandma so happy. When we arrived at Rosewood Manor, I felt my breath catch at the elegant transformation. White orchids and roses adorned every table, crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the private dining room, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. My parents stood near the entrance, my father distinguished in his charcoal suit and my mother radiant in an emerald evening gown, greeting guests like visiting dignitaries. Sarah, darling, my mother air-kissed my cheeks with practiced precision. You look comfortable. And Emma, don't you look absolutely perfect in that dress? I knew that color would complement your complexion beautifully. My father barely acknowledged me before turning his attention to Emma, lifting her into an enthusiastic hug. There's my special girl. I've saved you a seat right next to Grandfather at the head table. I felt the first twinge of unease, but pushed it aside. This was their celebration after all. The dining room filled quickly with familiar faces, distant relatives, business associates, country club friends. I circulated through the crowd, playing the role of dutiful daughter and accepting sympathetic comments about my divorce with practiced grace. Yes, it's been challenging, but we're adjusting well. No, I'm not dating anyone yet, focusing on the children. The kids are incredibly resilient. Everything seemed to be progressing smoothly until I spotted familiar figures near the entrance. Marcus stood confidently in an expensive tailored suit, his arm around Jennifer, who looked stunning in a designer dress I could never afford. My stomach clenched painfully. Did you know they were coming? I whispered urgently to my cousin Patricia, who was standing nearby. She looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. I assumed you knew. Your mother sent them a personal invitation weeks ago. Before I could process this information fully, my parents were greeting Marcus and Jennifer with warm embraces. My father clasped Marcus on the shoulder like a beloved son, while my mother admired Jennifer's dress and jewelry with genuine enthusiasm. I stood frozen, watching this cheerful reunion with the man who had betrayed me and the woman who had participated in destroying my marriage. When I finally caught my mother's eye, she offered a dismissive shrug. Oh, darling, you didn't expect us to exclude Marcus from such an important family milestone, did you? He's practically family, and bygones should be bygones. As I retreated to the bar for a much-needed glass of wine, I noticed Alex standing in a corner, his face pale and his jaw clenched. He was typing rapidly on his phone, his movements sharp with barely contained anger. I should have paid more attention to whom he was texting and why his distress was so intense. Instead, I took another sip of wine and reminded myself to maintain dignity for the remainder of the evening. The dining room hummed with animated conversation as the celebration reached its peak. Crystal glasses clinked melodically, servers moved gracefully between tables with gourmet appetizers, and the photographer captured carefully staged moments of happiness. I maintained my smile despite the growing discomfort of watching Marcus and Jennifer move through the crowd, accepting congratulations on their recent engagement announcement as if they were honored guests rather than the architects of my marriage's destruction. You're handling this remarkably well, my Aunt Linda whispered, squeezing my arm supportively. I would have thrown my wine in her face by now. I'm trying to take the high road for the children's sake, I replied, scanning the room for Alex and Emma. Emma was easy to spot, practically glowing as she sat beside my father at the head table, engaged in animated conversation with his business associates. My father's hand rested possessively on her shoulder as he introduced her to everyone as the future of Hayes Industries. Alex was more difficult to locate. I finally found him in a quiet alcove, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with my mother's brother, Uncle David. Alex's posture was rigid, his expression serious as he listened to David, who kept glancing nervously around the room. When they noticed me approaching, their conversation ceased abruptly. Everything all right over here? I asked with forced lightness. Just catching up with my nephew, David replied with an uncomfortable smile. He's become quite the observant young man. Alex's eyes met mine briefly. Uncle David was sharing some interesting family history, he said flatly, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. Before I could probe further, the gentle chiming of crystal announced the first toast. My father stood at the center of the room, commanding attention with his natural authority. "Catherine and I are overwhelmed by your presence here tonight," he began, raising his champagne flute toward my mother. 35 years ago, I made the smartest business decision of my life by marrying this remarkable woman. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd as guests raised their glasses. "Marriage is about building something lasting together," he continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "It's about making strategic decisions for the long-term benefit of the family. Sometimes that means prioritizing the future over temporary emotional discomforts." His eyes lingered on Marcus, then shifted to Emma, then briefly to me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating the past, we're securing the future. To family legacy, wise investments, and ensuring the right people are positioned to carry on our traditions." The guests raised their glasses enthusiastically, though several exchanged puzzled glances at the unusual anniversary toast that sounded more like a business presentation than a romantic celebration. As dinner progressed, I attempted to enjoy the expertly prepared meal despite my growing unease. Alex had barely touched his food and continued checking his phone under the table with increasing frequency. Emma, meanwhile, had been moved to sit between my father and Marcus, who were engaged in animated conversation that quieted whenever I approached their section of the table. During the main course, I excused myself to the restroom and nearly collided with Uncle David in the hallway. "Sarah," he startled, "I've been hoping to speak with you privately. Is everything okay? You seemed troubled during your conversation with Alex earlier." David glanced around nervously before speaking in a low voice. "I'm concerned about some discussions I've overheard tonight. Your father and Marcus have been having conversations about financial arrangements and legal modifications that seem unusual." "What kind of arrangements?" I asked, feeling a chill despite the warm evening. "Something about transferring property holdings and modifying custody agreements. They mentioned your name several times, along with words like instability and poor judgment." David squeezed my hand gently. "I know Robert can be controlling, but this feels different, more calculated." Before I could press for more details, my mother appeared at the end of the hallway. "There you are, David. The photographer wants all the siblings together for a family portrait." With an apologetic glance, David hurried away, leaving me with a growing sense of dread and an urgent need to find Alex. When I returned to the dining room, Alex was nowhere to be seen. Emma was now sitting on Marcus's lap, both of them laughing at something on his phone while my mother stood nearby, beaming with the kind of approval I rarely received. "Where's Alex?" I asked, scanning the room anxiously. "That boy," my mother sighed with exaggerated exasperation. "So moody and difficult lately. He said something about needing fresh air and stepped onto the terrace." I found Alex outside, his back to the party, speaking quietly but intensely into his phone. "Yes, I understand what the document said," he was saying. "I need to know if those signatures are even legal when they don't involve all the affected parties." He noticed me and quickly ended the call, tucking his phone away with shaking hands. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, moving to stand beside him at the railing. "Just someone who understands legal stuff," he replied evasively. "Mom, have you noticed how much time Grandpa has been spending with Marcus tonight?" "They're probably discussing business," I said, though uncertainty colored my words. "Your grandfather has always enjoyed mentoring young entrepreneurs." Alex studied my face with an intensity that was unsettling for a 14-year-old. "Mom, did you know that Grandpa keeps copies of all the family legal documents in his home office? The property deeds, trust paperwork, inheritance planning. How would you possibly know what's in your grandfather's office?" I asked, feeling increasingly confused. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Last month when we visited and you were helping Grandma in the kitchen, I needed somewhere quiet to work on my history project. Grandpa said I could use his office since he was playing golf." Alex's eyes held mine steadily. "I saw papers on his desk with your name and Marcus's name. There were yellow sticky notes marking sections about asset transfers and custody modifications. And Mom. Emma's name was highlighted in green, but mine wasn't anywhere on those documents. A chill ran through me despite the mild October evening. Alex, those are private legal documents. You shouldn't have been reading them. Even when they're about our family, about our future? He looked frustrated and frightened. Why are you more concerned about me seeing the papers than what was written on them? Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened as servers prepared for the anniversary cake ceremony. Alex gave me a long, searching look. Just watch them tonight, okay? Pay attention to how they position Emma in photos and conversations, and notice how they interact with Marcus like he never divorced you. Throughout the next hour, I found myself doing exactly what Alex had suggested, observing interactions I might otherwise have missed. My father's proprietary hand on Marcus's shoulder as he introduced him to potential business partners. My mother showing Jennifer family heirloom jewelry, pieces that had once been promised to me as the only daughter. Marcus's comfortable familiarity within my parents' inner circle, as though our divorce had been merely a temporary inconvenience rather than the end of our marriage. Most disturbing was how they consistently positioned Emma between themselves and Marcus in photographs, creating a visual narrative of family continuity that excluded both Alex and me. It was as though they were systematically editing us out of the family story while weaving Marcus more deeply into their vision of the Hayes legacy. The slideshow presentation began, projected on a large screen at the front of the room. 35 years of love and legacy. Read the opening slide in elegant script. As images of my parents' life together flashed by, I noticed a troubling pattern. My brother David and his family appeared frequently in recent photos. Marcus featured prominently in family gatherings from the past several years. Emma was showcased in numerous shots, often positioned between her grandparents. But images of Alex were sparse and relegated to large group photos where his presence was incidental. Pictures of me appeared infrequently, and when they did, I was often partially obscured or positioned at the edges of the frame. It was a visual representation of how my parents actually viewed our family hierarchy, with Emma as the chosen heir, Marcus as the preferred son-in-law, and Alex and me as increasingly irrelevant complications. When I glanced at Alex during the presentation, he was watching me intently, gauging my reaction to what he had undoubtedly noticed long before I had. As the slideshow concluded to enthusiastic applause, my father took the microphone once again. Before we cut the cake, Catherine and I have an exciting announcement to share. He gestured for Marcus and Emma to join him at the front of the room. I felt Alex's hand slip into mine, squeezing tightly with nervous energy. Family continuity has always been our greatest priority, my father continued, his voice carrying the authority that had built his business empire. Tonight, we're taking important steps to ensure Hayes traditions and properties remain in capable hands for generations to come. I watched in growing alarm as Emma stood between my father and Marcus, looking confused but pleased by the attention. In the coming weeks, we'll be finalizing legal arrangements that will secure our family legacy through proper channels and responsible stewardship, my father announced. Sometimes the most loving decision is making difficult choices for family members who may not yet understand what's in their best interest. A murmur ran through the crowd as Alex suddenly stood, his face pale but determined. "Mom," he whispered urgently, "we need to leave. Now." "We can't just leave in the middle of their announcement," I whispered back, conscious of the curious glances from nearby guests. "Emma is up there with them." Alex's eyes flashed with an intensity I'd never seen before. "Mom, please. Trust me for once. We have to go right now." The desperation in his voice gave me pause. Alex had always been mature for his age, but he wasn't prone to drama or attention-seeking behavior. If he was this insistent, perhaps I needed to listen. "Let me at least collect Emma and say proper goodbyes," I said quietly. "Make it quick," Alex urged, glancing nervously toward the front of the room where my father was still speaking. "And don't let Grandpa convince you to stay for the important details." I made my way through the crowd toward where Emma stood beside my father, conscious of the questioning looks following my movement. My mother intercepted me, before I could reach them. "Leaving so early?" she asked, her perfectly applied lipstick curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The evening is just getting to the interesting part, darling. Alex isn't feeling well." I lied smoothly. "I should get him home." "Send him with David," she suggested quickly. "You and Emma should stay for the important family discussions. Your father has worked very hard on these arrangements." I felt a chill at her insistence. "What arrangements exactly?" "Just some family business matters," she replied, patting my arm with condescending familiarity. "Nothing for you to worry about, dear. Your father knows what's best for everyone involved." "That's exactly what concerns me," I replied, moving past her toward Emma. Marcus appeared suddenly, blocking my path to the front of the room. "Leaving already?" he said, his familiar cologne triggering unwelcome memories. "Your father was hoping to discuss some important matters regarding Emma's educational trust fund." "Educational trust fund?" I repeated, noting how he specifically mentioned Emma, but not Alex. "Don't be difficult, Sarah," he said, lowering his voice. "Your parents are trying to secure Emma's future since you're obviously struggling financially. The least you can do is listen to their generous offer." Alex appeared at my side, his young face set with determination. "We're leaving now," he stated with surprising authority. "Emma, come with us." "But Grandpa said he has a special surprise for me," Emma protested, confused by the sudden tension. "We'll come back another time for the surprise," I promised, gently taking her hand despite my father's disapproving gaze from across the room. As we moved toward the exit, I caught fragments of conversation from a group of my father's associates near the door. "Transfer of assets should be straightforward once the custody arrangement is modified. Hayes keeping everything in the family, just not through the daughter. Marcus understands business better than she ever did." My father caught up to us at the entrance, his expression a practiced mixture of concern and disappointment. "Sarah, this is completely inappropriate," he said firmly. "We have important announcements to make, legal matters to discuss. Emma needs to be present for the family business portion of the evening." The possessive way he emphasized family business, while clearly excluding Alex, sent alarm bells ringing in my head. "Whatever it is can wait for another day," I replied, surprising myself with my firmness. "We're leaving." His expression hardened, the mask of paternal concern slipping slightly. "This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior that concerns us. Marcus would never put personal feelings above family obligations." "Marcus put his personal feelings into his business partner," I replied sharply, yet somehow he still considered the golden child. My father leaned closer, his voice low enough that Emma couldn't hear. "We're trying to protect family assets from your emotional decision-making. If you would stop being difficult and cooperate with these arrangements, this could be handled discreetly and painlessly." "What arrangements?" I demanded. "What are you planning?" He straightened, composing his features as another guest approached. "We'll discuss this when you're being more reasonable. Marcus and I have developed plans that benefit everyone involved, especially Emma's future." Alex tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, please. We need to go now." Looking into my son's eyes, I saw a mixture of fear and determination that decided me. Whatever he had discovered had genuinely frightened him, and my instincts were finally telling me to listen. I nodded, turned away from my father without another word, and guided my children through the ornate doors of Rosewood Manor into the cool October night. As we walked to my car, I felt a strange combination of dread and relief. Something was seriously wrong with my family's intentions tonight, and I was finally ready to discover exactly what they had planned for us. The drive home felt like an eternity, silence hanging heavy in the car broken only by Emma's occasional questions about why we had left so suddenly. Alex sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead with his hands clenched in his lap. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing at his phone as though expecting an important message. "Can someone please explain what just happened?" Emma finally asked from the back seat. Grandpa seemed really upset that we left, and I didn't get to see my surprise. "There will be other surprises, sweetheart," I said gently, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. Sometimes adults need to have complicated conversations, and tonight wasn't the right time. Alex remained silent until we pulled into our driveway. Mom, we need to talk, he said quietly. There are things you need to know, but not in front of Emma. I nodded, understanding. Emma, honey, go get ready for bed. Alex and I need to discuss some grown-up things. After Emma had reluctantly headed upstairs, Alex and I sat in our small living room. The modest space felt cozy and safe after the opulent grandeur of Rosewood Manor, but I could see the weight of whatever knowledge Alex carried in the tense set of his shoulders. Before you say anything, I began. I want you to know that I'm proud of you for speaking up tonight. I should have listened to your concerns months ago instead of dismissing them. Alex looked surprised by my admission. You believe something's wrong? The way they treated you versus Emma, the things Uncle David said, Marcus being there with Jennifer like honored guests. Yes, I believe something is very wrong. Now tell me what you know. Alex took a deep breath and pulled out his phone. Mom, I need to show you some things. But first, I have to tell you who I've been talking to. It's someone you haven't spoken to in years, but who understands Grandpa better than anyone. My heart skipped. Who? Aunt Rebecca. The name hit me like a physical blow. Rebecca was my father's youngest sister, effectively cut off from the family 12 years ago after a devastating conflict over her portion of our grandmother's estate. My father had painted her as unstable and money-hungry, convincing the family that she was dangerous and manipulative. We hadn't spoken since I was in college. How did you even find her? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Instagram. Alex replied simply. I started looking for her 3 months ago because... He hesitated, then continued. Because the way Grandpa treats you reminded me of stories I'd heard about how he treated her. I reached out because I wanted to understand the pattern. He handed me his phone, showing a lengthy text conversation. She's been warning me about Grandpa and Grandma's manipulation tactics. She told me to watch for signs like them getting unusually involved in custody arrangements, showing sudden intense interest in one grandchild over another, or making legal and financial plans without including the people most affected. I scrolled through the messages, my heart sinking as I read Rebecca's warnings and Alex's increasingly concerned responses over the past several months. Rebecca had been trying to prepare him for exactly what had happened tonight. That's why I've been paying such close attention to everything, Alex continued. But what I discovered tonight confirmed all of Aunt Rebecca's warnings. He took his phone back and opened his photo gallery. When I disappeared during the party, I went to find the office they were using for private conversations. I heard Grandpa and Marcus talking in the library about documents and signatures, and I wanted to see what they were planning. Alex, you can't just search through private papers. Mom, he interrupted, his voice urgent. They're planning to take everything from you. And they want to take Emma away from us. He showed me photos he had taken with his phone, legal documents bearing my name, Marcus's name, and my parents' signatures. Property transfer forms for assets I had been promised as inheritance. Custody modification petitions with notes in my father's handwriting about Emma's proper upbringing in the family tradition, and concerns about my emotional instability as a single mother. There's more, Alex said quietly. I also recorded some of their conversations. He played an audio recording, my father's authoritative voice coming through clearly. Marcus understands what's necessary to maintain the Hayes legacy. Sarah has always been too emotional, too independent. This divorce actually provides the opportunity we needed to restructure things properly. Marcus's voice responded, I appreciate your confidence in me, Robert. With the house transferred to me as Emma's primary guardian, we can ensure proper maintenance of family assets and traditions. Sarah would just liquidate everything to fund some artistic pursuit. My mother's voice joined the conversation. We've always worried about Sarah's judgment. Remember her wanting to major in art history instead of business? Or that completely inappropriate boyfriend she brought home from college? Thank goodness you've remained loyal to the family, Marcus. Despite the divorce, you're still the son we always hoped for. Tears blurred my vision as the recording continued, revealing more details of their comprehensive plan, challenging our divorce settlement to transfer more assets to Marcus, building a case for modified custody based on my supposed financial instability and emotional unpredictability, and systematically conditioning Emma to prefer time with her father and grandparents through gifts and promises of opportunities one couldn't provide. "They've been talking to Emma too," Alex said, his voice breaking slightly, "telling her that if she lived with Dad full-time, she could attend private schools and have real opportunities. That you're holding her back because you don't understand what's best for her future." The betrayal cut so deeply, I could barely breathe. My own parents, conspiring with my ex-husband to take my daughter and my inheritance, planning it methodically while using their anniversary celebration as cover for their scheme. "I couldn't let you stay there while they made their announcement," Alex explained. "Aunt Rebecca warned me that Grandpa often uses public family events to reveal decisions that have already been made privately. She said he did the same thing to her at Christmas dinner years ago, blindsided her in front of everyone so she couldn't react without looking unstable or disrespectful." I reached for Alex's hand, holding it tightly. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, "for paying attention when I was too blind to see what was happening, for being brave enough to investigate and get us out of there before they could ambush us publicly." He squeezed my hand back. "I was scared you wouldn't believe me. You always want to see the best in people, especially family." "I believe you," I said firmly. "And tomorrow we're going to figure out how to protect ourselves and Emma from whatever they're planning." As I tucked Alex into bed that night, I marveled at the courage and maturity my 14-year-old son had shown. He had recognized patterns I'd missed, gathered evidence I would never have thought to collect, and ultimately saved us from a public humiliation that would have left us legally and emotionally vulnerable. But as I lay awake in my own bed, staring at the ceiling and processing everything I'd learned, I realized that the hardest part was just beginning. Tomorrow would mark the start of a battle I never expected to fight, a battle against my own family for my children's futures and my basic dignity as their mother. Sleep was impossible that night. After lying awake for hours replaying the evening's revelations, I finally gave up and made my way to the kitchen. At 2 a.m., with Alex's evidence spread across my small dining table, I began my own investigation into my family's betrayal. First, I checked an old email account I had shared with Marcus during our marriage. He had always been careless about passwords, assuming I no longer accessed shared accounts after our separation. In his drafts folder, I found messages that made my blood run cold. "Robert agrees the property transfer should happen before the new school year. Custody modification to follow once Sarah's financial situation deteriorates further." Another draft, dated just 5 days ago, "Anniversary dinner perfect opportunity to announce new arrangements. Catherine concerned about Sarah's reaction, but Robert confident that family pressure will force compliance. Emma already responding well to preparation conversations." My hands shook as I continued searching. In his sent folder, I discovered emails to family attorneys requesting consultations about modifying custody agreements based on changed financial circumstances and living arrangements and protecting family assets from emotional decision-making by unstable parties. At 3 a.m., driven by a combination of fury and determination, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I searched for Rebecca Hayes online. I found her through her interior design business website and, taking a deep breath, sent her a text message. "Rebecca, this is Sarah. Alex showed me everything. I need to talk to you about Dad. I think you were right all along." To my amazement, she responded within minutes. "I've been waiting for this message for 12 years. Are you somewhere safe to talk?" We spoke for over 2 hours. Rebecca's story poured out. How her father had systematically manipulated her out of her inheritance using a family holiday gathering to publicly announce changes to trusts and property ownership that had already been legally executed without her knowledge. How he had turned family members against her by characterizing her objections as evidence of instability and greed. "History is repeating itself," she said, her voice heavy with familiar pain. "Dad sees the family as a business operation and family members as assets to be managed or liabilities to be controlled. When I chose a career he didn't approve of and married someone from outside his social circle, I became a problem to be solved." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I tried, Sarah. But you were young, planning your wedding to Marcus, Dad's hand-picked successor. You didn't want to hear anything that might complicate your perfect family narrative. The truth of her words stung because I recognized myself in that description. I had dismissed Rebecca's attempts to warn me, believing my father's version of events without question.
I'm sorry, he whispered.
I should have listened. I should have questioned why the family just eliminated you. What matters now is that you're listening, Rebecca replied, and that you have Alex. That boy is remarkable, perceptive, brave, and absolutely loyal to you. When he contacted me, I saw myself at his age, before Dad systematically destroyed my confidence and my relationship with the family. Before ending our call, Rebecca provided practical advice and the name of an attorney who specialized in family manipulation cases. Document everything, she urged. Don't confront them alone, and whatever you do, don't sign anything they present to you. Dad's strategy relies on catching people off guard and pressuring them into compliance before they can think clearly. At dawn, I called my older brother David, who lived in Seattle and had maintained careful distance from family politics for years. To my surprise, he confirmed much of what Alex and Rebecca had revealed. I've been aware of Dad's conversations with Marcus about property transfers and custody arrangements, he admitted reluctantly. I thought maybe you knew about the plans. Dad made it sound like beneficial financial restructuring that would help everyone, including you and the kids. Help me by giving my inheritance to my ex-husband and taking my daughter away. I asked bitterly. His silence spoke volumes.
I'm sorry, Sarah.
I should have questioned it more, should have talked to you directly. Dad has a way of making his schemes sound reasonable, even generous. Why, David? Why would they do this to me? He sighed heavily. Dad never forgave you for questioning his advice about Marcus during your marriage troubles. Then when you pursued the divorce despite his objections, in his mind, you became a threat to family stability and wealth preservation. Marcus promised to keep everything in the family bloodline through Emma, while you represented unpredictability. And Alex. Alex asks too many questions, challenges authority. Dad sees too much of his own father in him. Grandpa Joe always questioned Dad's business decisions, remember? Dad won't make that mistake with another generation. After ending the call with David, I spent the morning researching family law and custody modification procedures. The legal landscape was complex, but one thing became clear. My parents and Marcus had been building their case methodically for months, possibly longer. Their strategy involved documenting every financial struggle I'd experienced since the divorce, every work challenge, every moment where I'd had to choose between my children's immediate wants and our long-term stability. When Alex woke up and found me surrounded by legal documents and laptop research, he immediately understood what I was doing. Did you find more evidence? He asked, settling beside me with a cup of coffee he'd prepared. When had he become mature enough to make coffee? Your investigation led me to discover a lot more, I confirmed. I also spoke with Aunt Rebecca for the first time in 12 years. His face brightened slightly. She's amazing, isn't she? She understands exactly how Grandpa operates. She warned me about something important, I continued. She said your grandfather often uses public family events to announce decisions that are already legally complete. Alex, I think their announcement last night wasn't just a preview. I think they may have already filed custody modification papers. Alex's eyes widened with alarm. Can they do that without telling you? Not legally, I replied, but they can file preliminary motions and requests that I would only discover when served with papers. That's why we need to act quickly. I had already made the most important call of the day, to Jennifer Martinez, the attorney Rebecca had recommended. Unlike the family lawyers who had handled my divorce, men who played golf with my father and had known Marcus for years, Jennifer had no connections to the Hayes family network. Her office was professional but unpretentious, her manner direct and unimpressed by social standing or old Charleston money. Your situation isn't uncommon, Jennifer told me during our emergency consultation that afternoon, after reviewing Alex's evidence and my additional findings. Wealthy families often use financial leverage and legal maneuvering to maintain control over children and assets. The concerning part is how systematically they've approached this. What about the custody threats? I asked, voicing my greatest fear. Marcus has significantly more financial resources now, especially with my parents' backing. Money influences custody decisions, but it's not the determining factor, Jennifer assured me. Courts prioritize the children's established relationships and overall well-being. The recordings your son obtained actually work in our favor. They show a clear intent to manipulate custody for financial gain rather than the children's best interests. She outlined a strategy, beginning with immediate legal notifications preventing any property transfers without my consent, followed by formal documentation of the attempted parental manipulation and financial coercion. We'll also need to address Emma's situation carefully, she advised. From what you've described, they've been systematically conditioning her to prefer time with her father and grandparents through promises and material incentives. Alex, who had insisted on attending the meeting, spoke up. Emma's been confused lately. She keeps asking why Mom can't afford things that Dad and Grandpa can, and she started saying things like maybe she should live with Dad so she could have more opportunities. Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. Children are particularly vulnerable to this type of manipulation. Family therapy might help Emma understand what's happening in age-appropriate terms, while also providing documentation of the emotional manipulation she's experienced. After establishing our legal protections, I faced the difficult task of confronting Marcus directly. Following Jennifer's advice, I arranged to meet him at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, with my phone recording the conversation openly on the table. "This is completely unnecessary," Marcus complained, glancing uncomfortably at the visible phone. "We could discuss these family matters privately, like civilized people." Family matters became legal matters when you conspired with my parents behind my back, I replied, maintaining the calm demeanor Jennifer had coached me to display. Initially, Marcus denied everything, claiming misunderstandings and coincidences. But when I referenced specific documents Alex had photographed and conversations he had recorded, his strategy shifted to justification. "Your parents approached me," he admitted, lowering his voice and glancing around the busy cafe. "They were concerned about your emotional stability after the divorce, worried about the children's long-term security and opportunities. And their solution was transferring my inheritance to you and modifying our custody arrangement." He leaned forward, adopting the persuasive tone I remembered from our marriage. "Be reasonable, Sarah. Your father is offering financial security for both children's futures. Emma could attend the best private schools, have opportunities you simply can't provide on your current income. All you need to do is cooperate with the new arrangements." "And Alex," I challenged, "what opportunities does this arrangement offer him?" His hesitation confirmed what I already knew. "Alex is more independent. Your father thinks he might benefit from a different kind of structure, perhaps military school or a boarding program that could help him develop more respect for authority." The casual dismissal of my son's future made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. "Let me be clear, Marcus. I know about the property transfers, the custody modification requests, and your systematic campaign to turn Emma against me. I have documentation of all of it." Our conversation ended with Marcus realizing that intimidation and manipulation would no longer work. As he prepared to leave, he delivered a final warning. "Your parents have resources and connections you can't match, Sarah. Don't turn this into a war you're guaranteed to lose." His words might have terrified me 6 months ago, but Alex's courage had awakened something in me, a willingness to fight for my children's well-being regardless of the odds. The following weeks involved careful legal maneuvering and emotional healing. Jennifer filed court documents protecting my parental rights and blocking any property transfers. I scheduled family therapy sessions, bringing both children to create a safe space for them to express their confusion and concerns. "Grandpa told me that Dad needs me more than you do," Emma confessed during one session, her 10-year-old face creased with worry. "He said I'm supposed to carry on family traditions and that living with Dad would help me learn important things." "You're my daughter first," I told her gently, "and you don't have to carry adult responsibilities or choose between people who love you. Family traditions should include making sure everyone feels valued and protected." Alex thrived during this period of honesty and openness. No longer carrying the burden of protecting me from painful truths, he could focus on being a teenager again. His relationship with Emma improved as well, as she began to understand that his earlier skepticism about their grandparents had been protective rather than mean-spirited. The most unexpected development came from my renewed relationship with Rebecca. After 15 years of family-enforced separation, we discovered how much we had in common and how much we had missed of each other's lives. She had built a successful business in Colorado, married a wonderful professor, and raised 2 children I barely knew existed. Dad uses the same tactics every time, she explained during her first visit to our townhouse. Identify the family member who questions his authority, isolate them by characterizing their objections as evidence of instability, then use a significant family event to publicly announce decisions made in private. The goal is to make resistance seem petty or ungrateful. I can't believe I never saw the pattern, I admitted. Because he's careful to target only one person at a time, Rebecca replied. Everyone else stays in line, afraid they'll be next if they show too much support for the targeted family member. She was right about my father's tactical approach, but he had made a critical miscalculation with our family. He hadn't anticipated Alex's maturity and investigative skills, my willingness to finally stand up to him, or the possibility that his previous victims might provide support and guidance. David eventually chose a side as well, though more quietly than Rebecca and I had hoped. He provided copies of emails and financial documents my father had shared with him, offering additional evidence of the coordinated effort to restructure our family's assets and relationships. While he remained physically distant, unwilling to directly confront our parents, his information proved invaluable to our legal case. 3 months after the anniversary dinner, we reached a turning point. Marcus requested a meeting without lawyers or parents involved, claiming he wanted to resolve things amicably. This situation has spiraled out of control. He began when we met again at the same downtown cafe. The legal filings, the court involvement, the therapy sessions, it's affecting Emma, and it's affecting my relationship with Jennifer's family. I studied my ex-husband, noting the stress lines around his eyes and the way he kept checking his phone nervously. What changed your mind about supporting my parents' plan? He glanced away uncomfortably. Jennifer's parents have expressed concerns about the family dynamics they're marrying into. They think the custody battle and property disputes reflect poorly on everyone involved. In other words, his new in-laws had standards that his behavior wasn't meeting, and their approval mattered more to him than my parents' approval. I'm willing to withdraw my support from your father's asset restructuring plans, Marcus offered. I'll also agree to maintain our original custody arrangement without modifications. In return, I want you to drop the allegations of parental manipulation and family coercion. I considered his proposal carefully. I'll agree to those terms, but I need everything documented in writing, signed by attorneys. And any agreement must include protections for both children's inheritance rights and their relationship with me. Fair enough, he nodded. But Sarah, your parents won't give up as easily as I am. They see this as a fundamental challenge to their authority, and your father doesn't handle challenges well. He was right about my parents' likely response, but I was no longer the accommodating daughter who had deferred to their wishes for decades. A week later, we attended a family mediation session that my parents had reluctantly agreed to, primarily because their own attorney had advised them that their legal position was weaker than they had anticipated. The setting was Jennifer's conference room, neutral territory where my father couldn't rely on his usual home field advantage. The meeting was tense from the beginning. My parents arrived dressed for battle. My father in his most expensive suit, my mother in pearls, and the kind of outfit she wore to country club board meetings. They took seats across from Rebecca and me, their body language radiating disapproval and wounded authority. Before we begin, my father announced, his voice carrying its familiar tone of command, I want to state for the record that I object to Rebecca's presence here. This is a family matter, and she forfeited her right to family involvement years ago. Rebecca is family, I replied simply, and her experience with your financial manipulation tactics is directly relevant to these proceedings. Financial manipulation? My mother protested, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. We were trying to provide security for our grandchildren's futures. How has this family become so suspicious and ungrateful? Jennifer intervened before I could respond. Perhaps we should review the documented evidence before discussing motivations and feelings. What followed was a methodical presentation of the case we had built. Alex's recordings of private conversations, the property transfer documents, Marcus's emails outlining the custody modification strategy, and testimony from David about the family's pattern of financial coercion. My parents' faces grew increasingly rigid as Jennifer outlined the potential legal consequences, not just the blocking of property transfers, but possible civil claims for attempted parental alienation and breach of fiduciary duty. What exactly do you want from us? My father finally asked, his voice cold and controlled. Jennifer slid a document across the table. Ms. Mitchell's terms are straightforward. First, a legally binding agreement that all property and inheritance designated for her in existing family trusts remains intact and under her sole control. My father began to object, but his attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm. Second, a formal acknowledgement that both Alex and Emma have equal standing as beneficiaries of any family trusts or inheritances, with neutral third-party trustees replacing Mr. Hayes in any fiduciary role. My mother gasped audibly at this effective removal of my father's control over family financial matters. Third, a structured visitation plan for grandparent contact that includes professional oversight until trust can be rebuilt and maintained through appropriate boundaries. This is outrageous, my father sputtered. We don't need supervision to spend time with our own grandchildren. The recordings of you deliberately undermining Ms. Mitchell's parental authority and manipulating Emma's loyalties suggest otherwise, Jennifer replied calmly. The negotiations continued for hours, with periodic heated exchanges and tense silences. By late afternoon, we had reached an agreement that protected my inheritance, established equal treatment for both children, and created clear boundaries for my parents' involvement in our lives. As we prepared to leave, my father made one final attempt to assert control. I hope you're satisfied, Sarah, he said, his voice bitter. This vindictive campaign has damaged family relationships that may never recover. Alex, who had remained remarkably composed throughout the proceedings, finally spoke. Grandpa, with respect, you damaged those relationships when you decided Mom and I were expendable. We're just creating consequences for choices you made. The simple truth of his statement hung in the air as we departed, leaving my parents to confront the reality that their manipulation had failed and their authority had been successfully challenged. The months following our legal resolution brought significant changes to our lives. With my inheritance secure, I was able to purchase a larger house in a good school district, providing stability and space for both children to thrive. I expanded my role at the museum to full-time curator, finding both financial security and creative fulfillment in work I was passionate about. Alex flourished without the weight of family secrets and protective responsibilities. He joined the debate team, started volunteering at a local animal shelter, and developed closer friendships with classmates who appreciated his maturity and integrity. Most importantly, he rebuilt his relationship with Emma, who gradually understood that his earlier wariness about their grandparents had been protective rather than jealous. Emma's adjustment took longer, as she had to reconcile the loving grandparents she remembered with the reality of their manipulation. Family therapy helped her process the conflicting messages she had received and understand that love shouldn't come with conditions or require choosing sides. My relationship with my parents entered a carefully structured healing process. The supervised visitation plan began with brief, professional monitoring that gradually extended as they demonstrated respect for my parental authority and our family boundaries. My father struggled most with the new limitations, occasionally testing boundaries with expensive gifts or promises to the children, but consistent consequences eventually yielded grudging compliance. Do you think they'll ever really change? Alex asked one evening as we sat on the porch of our new home, watching the sunset and reflecting on our journey. I considered his question carefully. People rarely change fundamentally, especially at their age. But they can learn to behave differently when they understand the consequences of crossing boundaries. I still don't understand why they did it, he said. They have more money than they could spend in 3 lifetimes. Why try to take yours? It was never really about the money, I explained. It was about control, about punishing me for making choices they didn't approve of, divorcing Marcus, pursuing my career, raising you to think independently. When I stopped seeking their approval, I became a threat to their authority. Alex nodded thoughtfully. I'm glad we fought back. We couldn't have one without you, I told him, filled with pride and gratitude. Your perception, your courage in gathering evidence, your willingness to protect our family even when it was scary. You saved us, Alex. He smiled, embarrassed by the praise. I just paid attention. You taught me to trust my instincts. That's exactly what they didn't expect, I replied. They assumed you were too young to understand their manipulation, and that I was too conditioned to their authority to resist effectively. As darkness fell around us, I reflected on how this painful experience had ultimately strengthened our family bonds. For years, I had measured my worth through my parents' approval and Marcus's validation. Now I recognized my own strength, my children's resilience, and the power of chosen family relationships like my renewed connection with Rebecca. The inheritance I had fought to protect was important for our financial security, but the true legacy I wanted for Alex and Emma was something more valuable: the courage to define their own worth independent of others' expectations or manipulation, and the wisdom to trust their instincts when something felt wrong. Looking at my son, perceptive, principled, and brave beyond his years, I knew that legacy was already taking root. What do you think was the most important thing you learned from all this? I asked him. Alex considered the question seriously. That family isn't just about blood or money or tradition. It's about who actually protects you, who tells you the truth even when it's difficult, and who stands up for what's right instead of what's convenient. As we sat in comfortable silence, I thought about how easily we can miss the truth that's right in front of us, how readily we dismiss the perceptions of those we should trust most. My son had seen what I couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge, and his clarity had saved our family from a manipulation that could have destroyed us. 1 year after that anniversary dinner that changed everything, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice was different, less commanding, more tentative than I remembered. Sarah, I wanted to call because I've been thinking about that night, about everything that happened afterward. I waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. I won't pretend to understand all of your choices, she continued, but I can see how happy and secure the children are now. Alex seems more confident, and Emma?
She paused.
Emma talks about you with such respect and love. I realize we may have misunderstood some things about what was best for them. It wasn't a full apology or acknowledgement of the harm they had caused, but it was more vulnerability than my mother had ever shown. I appreciate you saying that, I replied carefully. Your father is struggling with the new arrangements. But I wanted you to know that seeing you succeed, seeing the children thrive, it's helping me understand that maybe we were wrong about some things. After ending the call, I shared the conversation with Alex, who listened thoughtfully. Do you think she means it? He asked. I think she's beginning to see us differently, I replied. Whether that leads to real change remains to be seen. But the most important thing is that we don't need their approval anymore to know our worth. Alex smiled. That's probably the most important lesson of all. As I reflect on our journey now, I'm grateful for the painful clarity that night brought to our lives. Sometimes the most important truth comes from the most unexpected sources. In our case, a 14-year-old boy who refused to let his family be destroyed by manipulation and lies. If you're watching this video, I hope our story reminds you to trust your instincts, especially when those instincts come from people who love you unconditionally. Don't dismiss concerns from family members who seem too young or too sensitive to understand complex situations. Sometimes they see patterns that adults have learned to rationalize or ignore. Most importantly, remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's approval, even when those people are family. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is set boundaries with people you love, and sometimes protecting your children means protecting them from the very people who claim to have their best interests at heart. Thank you for listening to our story. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself and your children is always worth the fight, no matter how powerful or intimidating the opposition might seem. And remember, trust the people who trust you enough to tell you difficult truths. In our case, That person was Alex, and his courage changed everything.